Garfield is an American comic strip created by Jim Davis, originally published locally as John in 1976, then in nationwide syndication from 1978 as Garfield. It chronicles the life of the title character Garfield the cat, his human owner John Arbuckle, and Odie the dog. As of 2013, it was syndicated in roughly 2,580 newspapers and journals and held the Guinness World Record for the world's most widely syndicated comic strip. Though its setting is rarely mentioned in print, Garfield takes place in Jim Davis's hometown of Muncie, Indiana. According to the television special Happy Birthday Garfield, common themes in the strip include Garfield's laziness, obsessive eating, love of coffee and lasagna, disdain of Mondays and diets. Garfield is also shown to manipulate people to get whatever he wants. The strip's focus is mostly on the interactions among Garfield, John, and Odie, but other recurring characters appear as well. On August 6, 2019, before its merger with the CBS Corporation to become Viacom CBS, now Paramount Global, New York City-based Viacom announced that it would acquire Paws Incorporated, including most rights to the Garfield franchise, comics, merchandise, and animated cartoons. The deal did not include the rights to live-action Garfield films, which are still owned by the Walt Disney Company through its 20th Century Studios label, as well as the upcoming animated Garfield film, which is set for worldwide distribution by Sony Pictures under its Columbia Pictures label, except in China, scheduled for 2024. Jim Davis continues to make comics, and a new Garfield animated series is in production for Paramount Global subsidiary Nickelodeon. History. Cartoonist Jim Davis was born and raised in Muncie, Indiana in 1973. While working as an assistant for T.K. Ryan's Tumbleweeds, he created the comic strip Norm Nat, which only ran in the Pendleton Times of Pendleton, Indiana from 1973 to 1975 and met with little success. Davis had tried to syndicate the strip, but was unsuccessful. He noted that one editor told him that his art was good, his gags were great, but nobody can identify with bugs. Davis decided to pursue current comic strips to determine what species of animal characters might be more popular. He felt that dogs were doing well, but noticed no prominent cats. Davis figured he would create a cat star, having grown up on a farm with 25 cats. Thus was created the character of Garfield. Garfield, the star, was based on the cats Davis grew up around. He took his name and personality from Davis's grandfather, James A. Garfield Davis, whom he described as a large, cantankerous man. The name John Arbuckle came from a 1950s coffee commercial. John's roommate Lyman, added to give John someone to talk with, carried on the name of an earlier Norm Nat character. The final character was Lyman's dog Spot, who was renamed to Odie so as to avoid confusion with the dog also named Spot in the comic strip Boner's Ark. From 1976 to early 1978, these characters appeared in a strip called John, which also ran in the Times. The John comic strip was largely unknown until 2019 when YouTuber Quentin Hoover found several digital scans of the John publication from the Pendleton Community Library and Indiana State Library. John first appeared in the Pendleton Times on January 8, 1976, just 2 weeks after Normnet ended. I love Quentin Reviews videos. Anyway, in March 1978, United Features Syndicate accepted the strip for national distribution, which had been retitled Garfield on September 1st, 1977. And the last Pendleton Times strip ran on March 2nd, 1978. United Features Syndicate debuted the strip nationwide in 41 newspapers starting on June 19, 1978. After a test run, the Chicago Sun-Times dropped the Garfield strip only to reinstate it after readers' complaints. The strip underwent stylistic changes, evolving from the style of the 1976 to 83 strips to a more cartoonish look from 1984 onwards. This change has mainly affected Garfield's design, which underwent a Darwinian evolution in which he began to walk on his hind legs, slimmed down, and stopped looking through squinty little eyes. His evolution, according to Davis, was to make it easier to push Odie off the table or to reach for a piece of pie. Garfield quickly became a commercial success. By the beginning of 1981, less than 3 years after its nationwide launch, the strip was in 850 newspapers and had sold over $15 million in merchandise. To manage the merchandise, David founded Paws Incorporated. In 1982, the strip was appearing in more than 1,000 newspapers. By 2002, Garfield became the world's most syndicated strip, appearing in 2,570 newspapers with 263 million readers worldwide. By 2004, Garfield appeared in nearly 2,600 newspapers and sold from $750 million to $1 billion worth of merchandise in 111 countries. In 1994, Davis's company Paws Incorporated purchased all rights to the strips from 1978 to 93 from United Feature. While retaining creative control and being the only signer, Davis now only writes and usually does rough sketches. Since the late 1990s, most of the work has been done by longtime assistants Brett Koth and Gary Barker. Inking and coloring work was done by other artists, while Davis spent most of his time supervising production and merchandising the characters. Content. Part of the strip's broad pop cultural appeal is due to its lack of social or political commentary. Though this was Davis's original intention, he also admitted that his grasp of politics isn't strong, joking that for many years he thought OPEC was a denture adhesive. Originally created with the intentions to come up with a good marketable character, Garfield has spawned merchandise earning $750 million to $1 billion annually, in addition to various merchandise and commercial tie-ins. The strip has spawned several animated television specials, 2 animated television series, 2 theatrical feature-length live-action/CGI animated films, and 3 fully CGI animated direct-to-video films. Marketing. Garfield was originally created by Davis with the intention to come up with a good, marketable character. Now, the world's most syndicated strip, Garfield has spawned a profusion of merchandise, including clothing, toys, games, books, Caribbean cruises, credit cards, dolls, DVDs of the movies or the series, and related media. Let me get a drink of water. Media. Books. Starting in 1980, the comic strip has been collected in anthologies. The first, Garfield at Large, was published in March 1980 by Ballantine Books. These books helped increase the strip's popularity through sales, leading to several of them reaching the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. For these compilation books, Davis devised a book layout which is considerably longer and less tall than the average book. This allowed the strip to be orientated in the same format as it appeared in the newspaper, as opposed to the earlier comic strip anthologies, which often stacked the panels vertically. This book style has been referred to in the publishing industry as the Garfield format and has been adapted by other publishers. Davis noted that it became popular for other comic book anthologies in particular, such as those from the Far Side. Internet. Garfield.com is the strip's official website, which contained archives of past strips along with games and an online store. Jim Davis had also collaborated with Ball State University and Pearson Digital Learning to create ProfessorGarfield.org, an educational website with interactive games focusing on math and reading skills, and with Children's Technology Group to create MindWalker, a web browser that allows parents to limit the websites their children can view to a preset list. A variety of edited Garfield strips have been made available on the internet, with some being hosted on their own unofficial dedicated sites. Dating from 2005, a site called the Garfield Randomizer created a 3-panel strip using panels from previous Garfield strips. Another approach, known as Silent Garfield, involved removing Garfield's thought balloons from the strips. Some examples date from 2006. A webcomic called Arbuckle does the above, but also redraws the originals in a different art style. The Arbuckle website creator writes Garfield changes from being a comic about a sassy, corpulent feline and becomes a compelling picture of a lonely, pathetic, delusional man who talks to his pets. Considering that John, according to the Garfield canon, cannot hear his cat's thoughts, this is the world as he sees it. This is his story. Another variation along the same lines, called Realfield or Realistic Garfield, was to redraw Garfield as a real cat and remove his thought balloons. Still another approach to editing the strips involved removing Garfield and other main characters from the originals completely, leaving John talking to himself. While the strips in this vein can be found online as early as 2006, the 2008 site Garfield Minus Garfield by Dan Walsh received enough online attention to be covered by news media. Reception was largely positive at its peak. The site reached as many as 300,000 hits per day. Fans connected with John's loneliness and desperation and found his crazy antics humorous. Jim Davis called Walsh's strips an inspired thing to do, and said that some of the strips worked better than the originals. Ballantine Books, which publishes the Garfield books, released a volume of Garfield Minus Garfield strips on October 28, 2008. The volume retains Davis as the author and features a foreword by Walsh. On June 19th, 2020, the website was shut down during the strip's 42nd anniversary following Viacom's acquisition of Paws Incorporated in August 2019. The website now redirects to nick.com with an alternative link to Go Comics. Television. Garfield's animation debut was on The Fantastic Funnies, which aired on CBS on May 15th, 1980, voiced by actor Scott Beach. Garfield was one of the strips featured, introduced as a newcomer. The strip is only 2 years old at the time, from 1982 to 1991. 12 primetime Garfield cartoon specials and 1 hour-long primetime documentary celebrating the character's 10th anniversary were aired. Lorenzo Music voiced Garfield in all of them. A Saturday morning cartoon show, Garfield and Friend, aired for 7 seasons from 1988 to 1994. This adaptation also starred Music as the voice of Garfield. The Garfield Show, a CGI series, started development in 2007 to coincide with the strip's 30th anniversary in 2008. It premiered in France in December 2008 and made a U.S. debut on Cartoon Network on November 2nd, 2009. A new series is currently in development at Nickelodeon after Paramount Global acquired the franchise. TV series, Garfield and Friends, The Garfield Show, Garfield Originals, Untitled Garfield series, to be decided. Primetime specials, Here Comes Garfield, Garfield on the Town, Garfield in the Rough, Garfield's Halloween Adventure, Garfield in Paradise, Garfield Goes Hollywood, A Garfield Christmas, Garfield, His 9 Lives, Garfield's Babes and Bullets, Garfield's Thanksgiving, Garfield's Feline Fantasies, Garfield Gets a Life. Films. A live-action/computed animated film titled Garfield the Movie was released in theaters on June 11, 2004, and a sequel titled Garfield, A Tale of Two Kitties was released on June 16, 2006. Both films were released by 20th Century Fox, with voice actor Bill Murray voicing the character in both films. Despite receiving negative reviews from critics, the films were both commercial successes. 3 direct-to-video films were released by 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment: Garfield Gets Real on November 20th, 2007, Garfield's Fun Fest on August 5th, 2008, and Garfield's Pet Force on June 16th, 2009. On May 24th, 2016, it was announced that Alcon Entertainment would develop a new CGI animated Garfield film with John Cohen and Stephen P. Wagner producing and Mark Dindal. In August 2019, Viacom acquired the rights to Garfield, leaving the status of the movie for the time uncertain, with Dindal confirming that the film was still in production in December 2020. On November 1st, 2021, Chris Pratt was announced as the voice of Garfield, with animation being provided by DNEG, a production company of the film. David Reynolds was announced as the screenwriter of the film, reuniting him with Dindal after they worked together on The Emperor's New Groove. Sony Pictures will maintain global distribution rights for the film apart from China. On May 24th, 2022, Samuel L. Jackson joined the voice cast as Vic, Garfield's father. In September 2022, the film was scheduled to be released on May 24th, 2024. Video games. A Garfield video game was developed by Atari Atari Incorporated for its Atari 2600 video game system and appears in their 1984 catalog. However, after Atari's spin-off and sale of its home games and computers division, owner Jack Tramiel decided the character's royalties were too expensive given the declining state of the video game industry at the time, and the game was canceled. A ROM image of the game was however released with Jim Davis's blessing. Garfield Big Fat Hairy Deal is a 1987 video game for the Atari ST, ZX Spectrum, Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, and the Amiga based on the comic strip. Tomochiki made a Week of Garfield for the Family Computer, released only in Japan in 1989. Sega also made the 1995 video game Garfield Caught in the Act for the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive, Game Gear, and Windows 3.1 computers. Other companies made games such as A Tale of Two Kitties for the DS, published by Game Factory, Garfield's Nightmare for DS, Garfield's Fun Fest for DS, and Garfield's Labyrinth for the Game Boy. On PlayStation 2 were Garfield and Garfield 2, known in the US as Garfield A Tale of Two Kitties. Garfield Lasagna World Tour was also made for PS2. Garfield Saving Arlene was only released in Japan and in the United Kingdom, and recent additions for mobile devices are Garfield's Diner and Garfield's Zombie Defense. Konami also released a Garfield handheld electronic game titled Lasagnator in 1991, which met with mild success. In 2012, a series of Garfield video games was launched by French publisher Newman Interactive, including My Puzzles with Garfield, Multiplication Tables with Garfield, Garfield Kart, and Garfield's Matchup. Garfield appears as a playable character through free DLC for 2021's Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. Stage. Joseph Papp, producer of a chorus line discussing making Garfield's stage musical, but due to some complication, it never got off ground. A full-length stage musical titled Garfield Live was planned to kick off its U.S. tour in September 2010, but got moved to January 18th, 2011, where it premiered in Muncie, Indiana. The book was written by Jim Davis with music and lyrics by Michael Dansicker and Bill Meade. It was booked by AWA Touring Services. The opening song, Catitude, can be heard on the National Tour's website, along with two more, On the Fence and Going Home. When the North American tour concluded in 2012, it toured throughout Asia. Comic book. An agreement with Paws Boom Studios launched in May 2012, a monthly Garfield comic book with the first issue featuring a story written by Mark Evanier, who has supervised Garfield and Friends and The Garfield Show, and illustrated by Davis' longtime assistant Gary Barker. Art book. In 2016, Hermes Press signed an agreement with Paws Incorporated to build an art book on the art of author Jim Davis titled The Art of Jim Davis's Garfield. The book includes an essay by author R.C. Harvey and other original material, and was released in July 2016 for the San Diego Comic-Con. Restaurant. In 2018, a ghost restaurant themed after the franchise known as Garfield Eats was opened in Dubai. Customers order food through the official mobile app, which also contains games and allows users to purchase episodes of Garfield and Friends. The restaurant serves lasagna, Garfield-shaped pizza, Garfuccinos, and Garfield-shaped dark chocolate bars. A second location opened in Toronto in 2019. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as dispute over rent, the restaurant closed in 2020. Main characters: Garfield, John Arbuckle; Odie, Dr. Liz Wilson; Nermal, Arlene. Through the Garfield strips, there have been many additional characters, but the main ones are described here. Garfield, first appearance, June 19th, 1978. Garfield is an orange fuzzy tabby cat born in the kitchen of an Italian restaurant, later revealed in the television special Garfield, His 9 Lives, to be Mama Leone's Italian restaurant, who immediately ate all the pasta and lasagna in sight, thus developing his love and obsession for lasagna and pizza. Gags in the strips commonly deal with Garfield's obesity. In one strip, John jokes, "I wouldn't say Garfield is fat, but the last time he got on a Ferris wheel, 2 guys on top starved to death." And his disdain of any form of exertion or work. He is known for saying breathing is an exercise. Though Garfield can be very cynical, he does have a soft side for his teddy bear, Pookie, food, and sleep. And during one Christmas he says, "They say I have to get up early, be nice to people, skip breakfast. I wish it would never end." However, in the feature film Garfield Gets Real and its sequels, Garfield is better behaved, friendlier towards John and Odie, less self-centered, and more sympathetic. It has been wondered by many readers if Garfield can actually be understood by the human characters around him. Sometimes it seems like John can hear him. However, it is mentioned in more than one strip that John cannot understand Garfield. However, in the feature film Garfield Gets Real and its sequels, Garfield and the other animals, save for Odie, are able to talk and be understood by John and the other humans. In the April Fool's Day, 1997 strip drawn by the artist of Blondie as part of the comic strip Switcheroo, Garfield, still with thought balloons, can be understood by John. To break the fourth wall, June 19th is celebrated within the strip as Garfield's birthday. The appearance in 1978 claimed it to be his first birthday, although in the first appearance of the strip, June 19th, 1978, he was portrayed as a fully grown cat, implying that the birthday is for the strip itself. John Arbuckle, first appearance, June 19th, 1978. John, full name Jonathan Q. Arbuckle, is Garfield's owner, usually depicted as an awkward, clumsy geek who has trouble finding a date. John has a crush on Liz, Garfield's veterinarian, and is now dating her. John disapproves of Garfield's don't care, not interested attitude, and often encourages his pet to take an interest in the world around him, sometimes stating an interesting fact or asking a philosophical question in an attempt to prompt Garfield into thought. Garfield tends to brush off these attempts with a simple yet logical remark, and despite the trouble Garfield causes, John has a heart of gold and is very tolerant of Garfield's shortcomings, a fact which Garfield often takes advantage of. In the December 23rd, 1980 strip, John states that he is 30 years old, normally meaning that he should be presently in his 60s, although he has not aged physically. His birthday is July 28th. John loves, or occasionally hates, Garfield and all cats. Many gags focus on this. His inability to get a date is usually attributed to his lack of social skills. His poor taste in clothes, Garfield remarked in one strip after seeing his closet that 200 moths committed suicide. In another, the geek police ordered John to throw out his tie, and his eccentric interests, which ranged from stamp collecting to measuring the growth of his toenails to watching movies with polka ninjas. Other strips portray him lacking intelligence. He is seen reading a pop-up book in one strip. John was born on a farm that apparently contained few amenities. In one strip, his father, upon seeing indoor plumbing, remarks, "Woo-ha, ain't science something?" John occasionally visits his parents, brother, and grandmother at their farm. It was implied that John is inspired by a drawing of Davis himself when he was first drawing the strip. John was portrayed as a cartoonist in the first strip, and occasionally others in the early years. Davis stated his intent had been to express his own frustrations as a cartoonist. Ultimately, John's job has been referred far more frequently in the Garfield animated series than in the strip. Odie. First appearance, August 8, 1978. Odie is a yellow long-eared beagle with a large slobbering tongue who walks on all four legs, though occasionally he will walk on two like Garfield. He was originally owned by John's friend Lyman, though John adopted him after Lyman was written out of the strip. The book Garfield, His 9 Lives, 1984, retcons Odie's origin. There is no mention of Lyman, and Odie was a puppy when he was acquired by John as company for Garfield, when Garfield was a kitten. Odie is younger than Garfield, and is usually portrayed as naive, happy, affectionate, and blissfully unaware of Garfield's cynical, sadistic nature, despite the physical abuse Garfield exhibits towards him, including regularly kicking him off the kitchen table or tricking him into going over the edge himself. On some occasions, however, he is depicted more intelligently, as in one strip in which he holds a heavy rock to prevent Garfield from doing this, and actually hurts Garfield's foot. In one strip, when Garfield and John are out of the house, Odie is seen reading War and Peace and watching An Evening with Mozart on television. But in Ask a Dog strips, he is depicted as illiterate and has to be read to by Garfield. Odie has only thought once, and another strip published on January 28, 2010, he is seen solving John's Sudoku puzzle. Dr. Liz Wilson. First appearance, June 26, 1979. Dr. Liz Wilson is Garfield and Odie's sarcastic veterinarian and a longtime crush of John Arbuckle. She has a somewhat deadpan, sardonic persona and almost always reacts negatively to John's outlandish and goofball behavior, but can even find it endearing on occasion. John often attempts to ask her out on a date, but rarely succeeds. However, in an extended story arc from June 20th to July 29, 2006, with the main event taking place on July 28, Liz and John kiss and have been a couple ever since. Recurring subjects and themes. Many gags focus on Garfield's obsessive eating and obesity, his dislike of spiders, his hatred of Monday diets and any form of exertion, his constant shedding, which annoys John, and his abuse of Odie and John, as well as his obsession with mailing Nirmal to Abu Dhabi, or simply throwing him through the front door. Though he will eat nearly anything, with the exception of raisins and spinach, Garfield is particularly fond of lasagna. He also enjoys eating John's houseplants and other pets, mainly birds and fish. He also has odd relationships with household pests. Garfield generally spares mice and even cooperates with them to cause mischief, much to John's chagrin, but will readily swat or pound spiders flat. Other gags focus on John's poor social skills and inability to get a date. Before he started dating Liz, he often tried to get dates, usually without success. In one strip, after failing to get a date with Nancy, he tries to get a date with her mother and grandmother. He ended up getting shot down by 3 generations. When he does get a date, it usually goes awry. John's dates have slashed his tires, been tranquilized, and called the police when he stuck carrots in his ears. The storylines featuring John's dates rarely appear now. Before he had dates with many odd characters, whereas now he exclusively dates Liz. Garfield's world has specific locations that appear normally on the comic strips, like the vet's office, a place he loathes. Irma's diner is another occasional setting. Irma is a chippy but slow-witted and unattractive waitress/manager, and one of John's few friends. The terrible food is the center of most jokes, along with the poor management. John periodically visits with his parents and brother on the farm. This results in a week-long comical displays of stupidity by John and his family and their interactions. There's a comic strip where John's brother Doc Boy is watching two socks in the dryer spinning, and Doc Boy calls it entertainment. On the farm, John's mother will cook huge dinners. Garfield hugs her for this. John has a grandmother who, in a strip, once kicked Odie. Garfield subsequently hugged her. John's parents have twice visited John, Garfield, and Odie in the city. John's father drove into town on his tractor, which he double parked, and brought a rooster to wake him up. As Garfield has a love for food, they will often eat out at restaurants. Most trips end up embarrassing because Garfield will pig out or John will do something stupid, including wearing either an ugly shirt, which happened one night when he took Liz on a date, or when John takes Liz out on a date, Garfield occasionally tags along. Once he ate the bread and other food at an Italian restaurant they went to. Frequently, the characters break the fourth wall, most likely to explain something to the readers, talk about a subject that often sets the strip's punchline, like John claiming that pets are good for exercise right before he finds out Garfield is in the kitchen and chases him out, or give a mere glare when a character is belittled or not impressed. Sometimes this theme revolves around the conventions of the strip. For example, in one strip, Garfield catches a cold and complains about it, noting that his thoughts are stuffed up. Short storylines. One particular semi-recurring storyline features John and Liz on a date in a restaurant. They are sometimes weighed on by the Italian Armando, who is refined and sophisticated and shows great loathing towards John, presumably for his immature and uncouth behavior at the prestigious eatery. On other occasions, the couple receives a different waiter, such as a large ogre-like man who intimidates John when he is about to report a complaint about the food. Another commonly recurring character, although he is hardly ever seen, is John's neighbor, Miss Feeney. Garfield seems to take both enormous pride and excess zeal in doing whatever it takes to harass her, to the point that she even erects an electric fence, which does not stop him. Other unique themes are things like Garfield's Believe It or Don't, Garfield's Law, Garfield's History of Dogs, and Garfield's History of Cats, which show science history and the world from Garfield's point of view. Another particular theme is National Fat Week, where Garfield spends the week making fun of skinny people. Also, there was a storyline involving Garfield catching Odie eating his food and kicking Odie into next week. Soon Garfield realizes that lunch isn't the same without Odie. He always slips up behind me, barks loudly, and makes me fall into my food. Garfield subsequently falls into his food by himself. A few days after the storyline began, Garfield is lying in his bed with a nagging feeling on forgetting something, with Odie landing on Garfield in the next panel. John and Liz began to go out more frequently. John started hiring pet sitters to look after Garfield and Odie, though they do not always work out. Two particular examples are Lillian, an eccentric and very nearsighted old lady with odd quirks, and Greta, a muscle-bound woman who was hired to look after the pets during New Year's Eve. Most of December is spent preparing for Christmas, with a predictable focus on presents. Other Christmas-themed strips include John's attempts at redecorating Other Christmas-themed strips include John's attempts at decorating the tree and house, or the attempt to buy the tree. Some years, the Christmas strips started as early as the end of November. Another example is Splut Week, when Garfield tries to avoid pies that are thrown at him. For most of Garfield's history, being hit with a pie has inevitably resulted in the onomatopoeia splut, hence the name. Every week before June 19th, the strip focuses on Garfield's birthday, which he dreads because of his fear of getting older. This started happening after his 6th birthday. However, before his 29th birthday, Liz put Garfield on a diet. On June 19th, 2007, Garfield was given the greatest birthday present: "I'm off my diet." Occasionally, the strip celebrates Halloween as well, with scary-themed jokes such as mask gags. There are also seasonal jokes with snow-related gags common in January or February, and beach or heat-themed jokes in the summer. One storyline, which ran the week before Halloween in 1989, is unique among Garfield strips in that it is not meant to be humorous. It depicts Garfield awakening in the future in which the house is abandoned and he no longer exists. In Garfield's 20th anniversary collection, in which the strips are reprinted, Jim Davis discusses the genesis for the series. During writing session for Halloween, I got the idea for this decidedly different series of strips. I wanted to scare people. And what do people fear most? Being alone. We carried out this concept to its logical conclusion and got a lot of response from readers. Reaction ranged from right on to this is a trend, isn't it? One of the reoccurring storylines involves Garfield getting lost or running away. The longest one of these lasted for over a month in 1986, from August 25th to September 28th. It began with John telling Garfield to go get the newspaper. Garfield walks outside to get it, but speculates about what will happen if he wanders off and decides to find out. John notices Garfield has been gone too long, so he sends out Odie to find him. He quickly realizes his mistake. Odie, not being too bright, also gets lost. John starts to get lonely, so he offers a reward for the return of Garfield and Odie. He is not descriptive, so animals including an elephant, monkeys, a seal, a snake, a kangaroo, and Joey, and turtles brought to John's house for the reward. After a series of events, including Odie being adopted by a small girl, both pets meeting up at a circus that they briefly join, and both going into a pet shop, Garfield and Odie make it back home. Another story involved John going away on a business trip around Christmas time, leaving Garfield a week's worth of food, which he devoured instantly. Garfield then leaves the house and gets locked out. He then reunites with his mother and eventually makes it back home in the snow on Christmas Eve, December 3rd to December 23rd, 1984. Part of the storyline was taken from the 1983 Emmy-winning special Garfield on the Town. Paws Incorporated. Paws Incorporated was founded in 1981 by Jim Davis to support the comic strip and its licensing. It is located in Muncie, Indiana, and has a staff of nearly 50 artists and licensing administrators. In 1994, the company purchased all rights to the Garfield comic strips from 1978 to 93 from the United Features Syndicate. However, the original black and white daily strips and the original color Sunday strips remain copyrighted to United Features Syndicate. The full-color daily strips with recolored Sunday strips are copyrighted to Paws, as they are considered a different product. The rights to the strip remain with Paws Inc. It is currently distributed by Universal Press Syndicate. In August 2019, Davis sold Paws Incorporated to Viacom, who has placed Garfield under the Nickelodeon banner.